Hey, we are in Ezra. We're going to take on chapters 3, 4, and 5 today. Remember, King Cyrus has allowed a group of um, uh, Israelites to return to Jerusalem to begin to rebuild uh, the the altar, the temple, the walls. Um, and they begin to do that. This is what we're going to see. We're going to see that there's some people that don't want them to do that. Samaritans were uh, not liked by the Jews. They intermarried with the Jews, and so they didn't consider them fully Jewish. Didn't know what they were doing there. Didn't want their help. Didn't trust them at all because they didn't just worship Yahweh God. They also worshiped their own gods, and so there was just this intermix, and they just never got along. And they don't get along all the way up into the Jesus's day. So we see a lot of animosity that's beginning to take place. But the remnant is coming back. They are excited. The first thing they're going to do is get back to worshiping God, which they could not do the way they wanted to in Babylon. They were going to do the altar, work on the temple, get that going. So let's go ahead and get into our text today. During the 7th month of the year, the Israelites who had settled in their towns went to Jerusalem. The priest Joshua, son of Jozadak, together with the other priests and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his relatives, rebuilt the altar of Israel's God. And then they were able to offer sacrifices there by following the instructions God had given to Moses. And they built the altar where it stood before, even though they were afraid of the people who were already living around there. Then every morning and evening, they burned sacrifices and offerings to the Lord. The people followed the rules for celebrating the Festival of Shelters and offered the proper sacrifices each day. They offered sacrifices to please the Lord, sacrifices at each new moon festival, and sacrifices at the rest of the Lord's festivals. Every offering the people had brought was presented to the Lord. Although work on the temple itself had not yet begun, the people started offering sacrifices to the Lord's altar on the first day of the 7th month of that year. King Cyrus of Persia had said the Israelites could have cedar trees brought from Lebanon to Joppa by sea. So they sent grain, wine, and olive oil to the cities of Tyre and Sidon as payment for these trees. And they gave money to the stone workers and the carpenters. During the 2nd month of the 2nd year, after the people had returned from Babylonia, they started rebuilding the Lord's temple. Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, Joshua, son of Jozadak, the priests and the Levites, and everyone else who had returned started working. Every Levite over 20 years of age was put in charge of some part of the work. The Levites in charge of the whole project were Joshua and his sons and relatives, and Kadmiel and his sons from the family of Hodabiah. The family of Henadad worked along with them. When the builders had finished laying the foundation of the temple, the priests put on their robes and blew trumpets in honor of the Lord, while the Levites from the family of Asaph praised God with cymbals. All of them followed the instructions given years before by King David. They praised the Lord and gave thanks as they took turns singing. The Lord is good. His faithful love for Israel will last forever. Everyone started shouting and praising the Lord because work on the foundation of the temple had begun. Many of the older priests and Levites and the heads of families cried aloud because they remembered seeing the first temple years before. But others were so happy they celebrated with joyful shouts. Their shouting and crying were so noisy that it all sounded alike and could be heard a long way off. The enemies of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people had come back to rebuild the temple of the Lord God of Israel. So they went to Zerubbabel and to the family leaders and said, "Let us help. Ever since King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here, we have worshipped your God and offered sacrifices to him." But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the family leaders answered, "You cannot take part in building a temple for the Lord our God. We will build it ourselves, just as King Cyrus of Persia commanded us." When the neighboring people began to do everything possible to frighten the Jews and to make them stop building. During the time that Cyrus was king, and even until Darius became king, They kept bribing government officials to slow down the work. In the first year that Xerxes was king, the neighboring people brought written charges against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Later, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and their advisors got together and wrote a letter to Artaxerxes when he was the king of Persia. It was written in Aramaic and had to be translated. A letter was also written to Artaxerxes about Jerusalem by Governor Rahum, Secretary Shimshai, and their advisors, including the judges, the governors, the officials, and the local leaders. They were joined in writing this letter by people from Erech and Babylonia, the Elamites from Susa, and people from other foreign nations that the great and famous Ashurbanipal, how you like that, had forced to settle in Samaria and other parts of the western province. This letter said, Your Majesty, King Artaxerxes, we are your fellow servants from everywhere in Western Province, and we send you our greetings. You should know that the Jews who left your country have moved back to Jerusalem and are now rebuilding that terrible city. In fact, they have almost finished rebuilding the walls and repairing foundations. You should also know that if the walls are completed and the city is rebuilt, the Jews won't pay any kind of taxes, and there will be less money in your treasury. We are telling you this because you have done so much for us, and we want everyone to respect you. If you look up the official records of your ancestors, you will find that Jerusalem has constantly rebelled and has led others to rebel against kings and provinces. That's why the city was destroyed in the first place. If Jerusalem is rebuilt and its walls completed, you will no longer have control over Western Province. King Artaxerxes answered, Greetings to Governor Rahum, Secretary Shimshai, and to your advisors in Samaria and other parts of Western Province. After your letter was translated and read to me, I had the old records checked. It is true that for years, Jerusalem rebelled and caused trouble for other kings and nations. And powerful kings have ruled Western Province from Jerusalem and have collected all kinds of taxes. I want you to command the people to stop rebuilding the city until I give further notice. Do this right now so that no harm will come to the kingdom. As soon as the letter was read, Governor Rahum, Secretary Shimshai, and their advisors went to Jerusalem and forced everyone to stop rebuilding the city. The Jews were forced to stop work on the temple and were not able to do any more building until the year after Darius became king of Persia. Then the Lord, God of Israel, told the prophets Haggai and Zechariah to speak in his name to the people of Judah and Jerusalem, and they did. So Zerubbabel, the governor, and Joshua, the priest, urged the people to start working on the temple again, and God's prophets encouraged them. Governor Tattenai of Western Province and his assistant Shether-Bozenai got together with some of their officials, and then they went to Jerusalem and said to the people, Who told you to rebuild this temple? Give us the names of the workers. But God was looking after the Jewish leaders, so the governor and his group decided not to make the people stop working on the temple until they could report to Darius and get his advice. Governor Tattenai, Shether-Bozenai, and their advisors sent a report to Darius, which said, King Darius, we wish you the best. We went to Judah, where the temple of the great God is being built with huge stones and wooden beams set in the walls. Everyone is working hard and the building is going up fast. We asked those in charge to tell us who gave them permission to rebuild the temple. We also asked for the names of their leaders so that we could write them down for you. They claim to be servants of the God who rules heaven and earth, and they said they were rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago by one of Israel's greatest kings. We were told that their people had made God angry, and he let them be captured by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, who took them away as captives to Babylonia. Nebuchadnezzar tore down their temple, took its gold and silver articles, and put them in the temple of his own God in Babylon. They also said that during the first year Cyrus was the king of Babylonia, he gave orders for God's temple to be rebuilt in Jerusalem, where it had stood before. So Cyrus appointed Sheshbazzar governor of Judah and sent these gold and silver articles for him to put in the temple. Sheshbazzar then went to Jerusalem and laid the foundation for the temple, and the work is still going on. Your Majesty, please have someone look up the old records of Babylonia and find out if King Cyrus really did give orders to rebuild God's temple in Jerusalem. We will do whatever you think we should. So we see a lot of animosity going on, unfaithfulness to people by people around that area, trying to dissuade the Jews from rebuilding everything. And so it's a traumatic time. The only thing that I want to really point out is that in chapter 3, you saw that some people were rejoicing, some were crying as the altar is rebuilt, the temple's foundation is being rebuilt. And remember, you've got some people that are coming back after these 50 years or so, and they remember what the altar looked like. They remember how magnificent that temple looked. They saw it be destroyed. Their hearts are broken. They're led off in captivity. And now they're coming back and they're starting to rebuild, but they know it will never be like it used to be. Sometimes we look at our life and we look back and we realize some of the mistakes that we've made, or we realize how faithful God was in circumstances, and we might feel like it's not the same now, and we're kind of crushed because we realize that things can't be the way they used to be. We wish they were, but they're not. So for us, it's kind of like the Jewish people. There's going to be tough times, but what we do is we get back up on our feet. We get back to our first love, and that's worshiping God, just like the Jews did. And so that's what our challenge is. Leave the past, move forward, put God first. Have a great day.